So Zoro thing. Here's my thing with Zoro. I think with Zoro that I don't think it's bad in retrospect. I think that with Zoro it's kind of like how do I say this? I feel like it shouldn't have been played up so much in the arc itself. That's the only thing. I just don't get why it was played up so much in the arc itself, right? And I guess that's what most people are upset about. Why? Because when you're playing things up in the arc itself, right? My take on everything is usually that it's cool if Oda wants to clarify things again for clarification in SBSs and stuff, but I still personally feel that when I'm reading a manga or story or book or whatever, um, my experience, my primary experience, right, the reader's actual experience of the story is what's being put on the pages, right? So for me, this doesn't really change my experience with the Zoro storyline in Wano, which is okay. Threads are being dropped about this character, and the significance of him being tied to this country is being built into the story, right? It's being written into the story and played up and teased and hinted at and highlighted, right? Those things are undeniable because as soon as you're dropping things like the lineage and playing up the mystery around the lineage, which Oda most certainly did, right? The tone that comes with it, the sort of questioning nature of how characters are reacting to it, the sort of setup, right? Sense of setup that we're getting out of planting a mysterious tone, mysterious questioning around this sort of story, like connection between Zoro and Wano. And it kind of keeps growing in significance. So it wasn't just like a one-off connection. Oh, he looks just like Ushimaru. It then moved on to us learning about Ryuma, and Ryuma's this god of the blade who defended the land and everything like that, and gave Wano its reputation. And then eventually comes down to, oh my god, Zoro's the striking image of not just Ushimaru, but Ryuma himself, right? The god of the blade, the the person that saved Wano in the first place, right? Like Wano's first real like symbol, right? So it's all really playing up Zoro's connection to this land, right? So it's playing up Zoro's connection to this land, and it's not on. It's three things, right? So it's playing up Zoro's connection to the land. So that means that Oda's planting the expectation because this is something the author is planting, right? Once you're writing in a deliberately mysterious tone and continually dropping hints at a greater sort of picture or greater sort of connection, right? So you are planting an expectation for a important connection to the land. Otherwise, this is pointless writing, right? Pointless writing. Then on top of that, it's planting a sense of significance for the character, right? So for what this means for Zoro's character in the arc, right? There's no reason to be writing this stuff if it doesn't lead to something greater for his character, right? Saying that Zoro is connected, or heavily implying that Zoro is connected to Ryuma, who is the most important figure in all of Wano history, right, means that you're basically planting the idea that this is like something very important or something very meaningful for Zoro is going to come out of this, because why would you be driving in the significance of him being the direct descendant of the person that saved this land in the first place, right? So you're planting the expectation that there's going to be something greater for the character. So both sides, right? You're planning the expectation that the connection is going to matter, and you're planning the expectation that something is going to come of this for the character, right? Something is going to be, important for the character in some sense, related to Wano, that goes beyond what we usually expect of him from each arc, right? So that's kind of, that's just a thing, right? That's just a thing that exists in the arc. You can't skip those parts now, right? They're part of the story, and they just go nowhere, right? So in the actual text of One Piece, that's just random bullshit, basically, that just doesn't go anywhere, right? And it turns out it's not important at all, right? So it's just stuff that you just wouldn't include. It makes no sense to include, because it becomes if Oda didn't include those few panels of hyping up Ushimaru, hyping up Ryuma, and hyping up Zoro's connection to Ryuma, Zoro's storyline reads exactly the same in Wano. You don't really feel like you feel like there's other stuff missing for his character, but you don't feel like some connection to the Shimotsuki heritage and stuff like that is really missing. The similarity of Ushimaru's appearance to him becomes an interesting little tidbit, because we do see a bit of Ushimaru in Kaido's flashback, so it's an interesting little tidbit, and it's like, oh, why is that? And then down the line, we find out in SBS that, hey, Zoro actually is from Wano. I don't think Zoro actually being from Wano, or like being a descendant from people who traveled from Wano, is bad. It's literally just Oda wanting Zoro to be a descendant of Ryuma, which, again, I don't think is bad. You can say that it makes Zoro less special, but it's like being a descendant of Ryuma, it's just like, it's so distant. It's so absurdly distant in the past, you know what I mean? It's like, how many hundreds of generations back do you have to go? And like, it's like, you know, Zoro's dad wasn't special just because he's descended from Ryuma. Ushimaru wasn't all that special because he's descended from... There's so many characters that are also like Shimotsuki Yasue, all of these characters, right? They're all technically coming from the same lineage. Zoro just happens to be one of them. I think that's fine. I did personally prefer always that Zoro is just some kid from East Blue rather than coming from a very important dynasty from the land of greatest swordsmen. But I don't think this changes that much for me, for him. So with regards to how it changes how I view Zoro's character, right? It doesn't. How I view Zoro's plot in Wano, it's just what we already expected, which was just like, this stuff was written in and then it went nowhere, right? And it's just really, really bizarre that you would hype up the mystery around this and then not include that, and it just has no significance in the story. It does nothing for the story. Like, Zoro being related to Ryuma is just a thing. It doesn't... It's just like, could he be related to Ryuma? Doesn't matter for Zoro. Leads to nothing for his character. His connection to Ryuma gives him no greater role in Wano than any other arc. Zoro doesn't really have a greater role in Wano than he has in any other arc. It's just weird. And I just really dislike so much of the discourse around the Wano arc, because a lot of it's just like, the things that people talk about, I think a lot of it just comes down to like, oh, drop plot threads or felt rushed and stuff like that. And I think there's so much more that, like, I think that's just, like, those are the symptoms of what's really going on with the broader way that the arc was structured, the character storylines were written, and the themes were brought together, basically. So that's why I don't like Wano discourse in general, because, like, people can point to, like, the things that people point to very often. It's like, oh, Zoro didn't visit Ryuma's grave and stuff like that. That's, like, such a minor point, really. That's such a minor point, and I don't like when people bring stuff like that up, because that's stuff that other people who are, you might say, Oda's angels, can come in and just be like, so what if it was missing a few rush plot points or stuff like that? Overall, like, the highs and stuff like that. It just kind of, it becomes very nitpicky, almost discourse. I think a lot of the ways, like, people try to point out flaws with Wano. And, like, the bigger things that people feel like, a lot of people felt like there was no tension. A lot of people felt like there was too many characters and stuff like that. Those feel like the bigger core issues that then lead to a lot of these smaller issues, right? And those core issues are things that I don't think are well fleshed out, because lots of people are like, too many characters. And then people will say in response, well, I think Momonosuke was well done, and I think Robin got a good moment, and I think this and that. So it's a mixed bag with characters, when I feel like the full discussion of, okay, why did it feel like there were too many characters? Why did it feel like, even though some characters got good stuff, at the end of the day, certain things had to be cut short, certain things never got to sink in fully, certain dramatic moments were maybe not as dramatic as expected. A lot of this led to a lack of tension, stuff like that. The real meaty, juicy discourse of Wano, I think I don't see good criticism or discussion around that. That's what I want to talk about. When I talk about this, like, Zoro not visiting Ryuma's grave is going to be like, not even making, it doesn't make the cut for the video. There's so many things that people talk about, like Chopper not curing Smile, that's not going to make the cut for the video, because that's like a nitpicky point. I brought it up on Twitter for fun, not for fun. I brought it up on Twitter because it's something I don't like, but like, lots of people latch on to things like that. Like I would argue even Hiyori and the Kurozumi line, that probably won't even, like, that's not in the current draft of the script, basically. There's so much more. So, although Hiyori Kurozumi should go in there, I think that one's important, because that's thematically important. But, yeah, it's just, the bottom line being, I want to get the video out just because I don't like, even though Wano's already a divisive arc, I don't like a lot of the critiques that I'm seeing of it, because they feel, to me, particularly shallow, or just trying to find symptoms rather than the underlying causes, basically, right? Like, we didn't like, you know, this being resolved in SBS or that being resolved in SBS. It's like, okay, why was that bad though? Like, what's going on there?